Bran, 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 Bran.
Sup? As you can tell, I'm back up at the water reservoir, same spot I was when I was reflecting on Another Life in Strangeverse. I mostly came here because I'm sick of recording shit in my fucking apartment, and I needed a walk. I'm getting a little bit fat again. I need to shake my belly. It seems like a nice place to talk about Game of Thrones with all this nature. So this vlog is kinda in two parts in a way. The first half of it is gonna be focusing on what I thought of the last season of Game of Thrones. Spoilers, I didn't like it too much. And the second half of it is gonna be me talking about how I would have done season 8. That might take a little while, and if it seems there are a lot of jump cuts in that part, it's probably because I didn't write it all down, and I'll probably be remembering all of the things that I would have done, but not in correct order. So without further ado, let's start. First of all, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I love the books, I love the show. I mostly started loving the show more when it overtook the books because at that point it didn't have a source material to kind of constantly counter-reference it with. It was super fun because then I could kind of look at the show at on its own merits. And season 6, which was the first season where they kind of overtook the books or went past the books, I really liked that season. Although at that point you kind of started seeing the cracks a little bit, but it was still a really solid season. It was a well done season. Season 7, those cracks started to become a little bit wider. And by season 8, those cracks were just fucking chasms, man. Season 8, didn't particularly like it. The acting is good. Really loved the acting. The visual effects were astounding. Especially for a TV show. Production value is just off the fucking hook. Cinematography, directing, all of it is like really, really fucking good. There's a lot of callback to previous episodes and previous plot points. This is good for a final season. But there is just so much that they do. There's so much inconsistency in the plot for the sake of drama that it makes me fucking sick. It annoys me so much. Hello, beetle. There's a little beetle here, and I am getting distracted by a little beetle. Fuck, what was I saying? I like the twist that Arya was the one that killed the Night King. That was a pleasant twist, and they did a little bit of foreshadowing for it, but it still kind of didn't feel all that right. But I still will accept that. What I won't accept is that they killed off the Night King in episode 3. Why on earth is the first scene of the first episode of Game of Thrones focusing on the White Walkers if they are not going to be the main threat throughout the entire series? It just... Why build something up for 8 fucking seasons, 7 seasons, 7.5 seasons, for it to just end before the show actually ends? It makes no sense. It makes no gosh diggity darn sense. Diggity darn. Another big inconsistency is the power of the dragons and the scorpions, those little ballista weapons that they use to attack the dragons. Because at the end of episode 4, those scorpions are just the most powerful weapons ever made by man. They decimate Dany's entire fucking fleet. They kill Rhaegal, and Drogon is just absolutely powerless to stop them, to destroy them. Like, the dragons are absolutely useless. And the right next episode after that, it's the exact opposite. The scorpions don't do shit. They're super slow to reload, while in the previous episode they were super fast to reload. And it's just like the dragon, just Drogon just decimates everything, which I'm fine. In terms of fantasy, dragons should be basically atomic weapons, but not just when it suits the plot or the drama. Like, don't make them absolutely useless in one episode and then all of a sudden next episode it's just like they're invincible. Like, fucking what the hell? And another thing, at the end of the day, I'm fine with Dany going mad. Excuse you, bird. Excuse you. At the end of the day, I'm fine with Dany just going mad, but it felt really undeserved. It felt really unbuilt up. Like, I'm assuming that by season 6 they knew how they were gonna end it. And they basically spent, instead of spending 2 seasons building that up, they foreshadow a lot that she would prefer to burn cities, but they've also built her up as this champion of innocence and the small folk, and then she just, without almost just any build-up, she just starts to fucking burn down King's Landing. Just men and women. She doesn't, like, it's not like they're collateral damage. She's intentionally burning them down. That being said, though, there are a lot of really cool moments, like the moment when the Starkmen and the Unsullied just start raping and pillaging. That was a great fucking Game of Thronesy moment. We haven't had that in ages. It was horrifying, but it's absolutely what Game of Thrones is about. Sometimes the good guys are just bad guys too. It's just people. I basically, for this past week or more, I've basically been talking about this ad nauseum. I had a date the other day, and basically, like 50% of our conversations were about Game of Thrones and how we disliked what it had become. Like, it's that prevalent in all of our minds, actually, because Game of Thrones is such a huge show. It's such a pop culture icon. And we've all been so invested in this show for years, it's hard not to be super invested in how it ends and super passionate about how it ends. That being said, I didn't absolutely hate where every character ended up. It's just the way that they got there that really didn't make much sense. So without further ado, let me list down what I would have done instead. I remember reading an article, like I wasn't certain that I had read it, and I had to like look it up, but it wasn't apparently HBO's idea to make the final season 6 episodes. Like, apparently that was a showrunner's idea, and I feel like that was at the time, I remember thinking, like, that's a great idea. Like, don't drag it out too long. But now, in hindsight, I'm like, you know what? Maybe you should have added maybe 1 or 2 more episodes just to, like, really flesh out Dany's descent into madness. Like, that would have been great. I would have fucking loved that. So, if I would have made the final season of Game of Thrones, and we're not really taking into account budgeting or, like, how much money this version of season 8 would have required, probably would require a lot more money, and I'm fully aware of that. There's always like a balancing act with that. Like, a lot of people seem to kind of think that it's like, oh, they'll just have as much money as they wanted, and like they're not tied down by any of that. No, of course they were. But for this thought exercise, we're not going to be tied down by money. I'm just thinking in terms of plot how I would have ended it. So, my version of season 8 would have at least 7 episodes. I'm gonna, like, maybe I would preferably say 8 episodes, but let's put a limitation that just 7 episodes. Like, that's still within similar bounds as what we got, and that might, and it's still like a similar limitation. Now, first episode, I actually wouldn't change a whole lot. I would just keep it mostly the same, but I would change the conversation between Tyrion and Varys. Mainly because these are 2 of the smartest, most educated men in Westeros, and they're exchanging dick jokes. Wouldn't they exchange maybe some kind of super learned political humor? I'm just wondering. Episode 2. I would keep it mostly the way it was. It's a good build-up episode. They're kind of laying down their battle plans, all that. I would change their battle plans, however. Maybe putting the catapults and trebuchets on top of the wall. That would be a great start. Digging the pits, like several pits down the battlefield. Keeping the Unsullied behind the fucking pits and use the Dothraki to basically take down whatever whites and White Walkers that pass through their defenses, like their initial defenses. Let's just say those are kind of like the battle plans. They're still maintaining that Bran is going to be in the Godswood. So apparently the idea that the showrunners had was that the Night King couldn't really be killed. He could only be uncreated in the same way that he was created. And if you guys remember in season 6, Bran sees him kind of get stabbed through the heart with his dragon glass dagger in front of a weirwood tree. So the idea apparently for the show was that that was the only thing that could kill him. He could be killed with dragon glass or dragon glass or Valyrian steel, I suppose, in front of a weirwood tree. And that would be the only thing that could kill him. Now let's say that Bran didn't necessarily know that, because otherwise he should have just said that. But he doesn't know that. He does know how the Night King got created, and he does tell people that. His idea is that the Night King is still coming to get him. So he's going to be hiding in the Godswood. Theon is going to be protecting him. Most of the other characters are sort of in the same place. Dany and Jon are still planning to kind of fly in on the dragons and do strafing runs, blah, blah, blah. Dany and Jon still kind of come to heads with Jon's true parentage. Dany doesn't like that, obviously. But the episode doesn't end there. The episode continues on a little bit, and we see the first part of the battle. The Whites start to attack. We do see, like, they shoot their trebuchets. We do see the trebuchets and the fires kind of like into the darkness, and they just kind of die out. And we do see some of the Whites kind of come out and pass through their defenses. And we do see their beacons, the beacons that they've lit to obviously try and light up the battlefield, keep dying. Melisandre comes back. She does light all the Dothraki swords on fire. They come do their strafing runs to the sides. But the episode would basically end with, it kind of looks like they're super successful. They're taking out all these Whites, and then all of a sudden we just see all their lights kind of go out. And it's just like, oh my god, there's like way more Whites than we thought it would. That would be a cliffhanger ending. That's how the second episode should end. Now, third episode. Mostly it's the same. We see them all basically defending Winterfell. They have evacuated all the people south, because they're not entirely sure how this battle is going to go. They do have an escape route through the crypts, let's just say that. Or they're trying to make one. All the innocent people that have been flown south before the episode, obviously. And throughout the episode, we just see their battle plans kind of crumble. Just like there's nothing that can withstand the Long Night and the White Walkers and the Whites. Dany and Jon try to stick to their plan. But let's say still, for the sake of attention and drama, that the storm still comes blowing in and sends them off course, and they get lost, and they try to find the Night King. Everything is about trying to find the Night King and trying to hold out until he can be found. Now, it makes sense that Sansa would leave with the people. And I would maybe even say that Tyrion gets sent away too. Now, let's say that we're still basing this off of the fact that season 6 and 7 stay the same. Tyrion would not have had much to do, so I maybe would have him stay behind and act as a bit of a general, because he has to strategize battles before. And like he said in the actual episode, maybe he would spot something that the others wouldn't. Their defenses keep crumbling. I would have a lot more characters die as they basically fall back into the keep and prepare to just like make their final stand. It quickly becomes apparent that they are just losing. There's just no way they can win this fight. They are absolutely outnumbered. Dany and Jon fight the Night King in the sky. The dragons get wounded and get kind of taken out of the battle. They kind of need to be. Now, one of the other major changes I would do to episode 3 is that Dany is forced to re-kill Viserion. And the fact that she has to be the one that puts him down for good is absolutely traumatizing for her. She's killing her own child. She's seeing her own child die, and she has to kill it again. How fucking horrible would that be? The Night King lands much as he did in the show, and the Whites just start scaling the walls. Dolorous dies. Jorah dies, because Jorah kind of needs to die in order for Dany's descent into madness to really, really start. He dies defending her. Jon tries to get close to the Night King, but doesn't. Love that. That can stay the same. Beric Dondarrion still sacrifices himself for Arya. And we kind of get this idea that Arya is supposed to kill the Night King. Melisandre kind of says it. Let's just base it off that same idea that Arya is still going to kill the Night King. Oh no, actually, it would be great if Jon comes face to face with the Night King, stabs him through the chest, and it does nothing. Dany blows the fire on him, it does nothing. Nothing seems to kill the Night King. Nothing that kills all the other White Walkers or all the other Whites doesn't kill him, because there's only one way to kill him. With Dragonglass Dagger through the heart in front of a weirwood tree. Now, everything kind of still plays out the same, except at the end, they all kind of have to retreat into the crypts. And just like either try to make a final stand there, or just fucking break a leg. Just fucking get the hell out of there. There's no way they're going to survive. Theon continues to defend Bran valiantly. And we would have this same scene where Bran turns to him as he's just not going to make it, and we all know it. And he tells Theon, "You're a good man. You've repaid your debts. You can go." And Theon just like looks at him and just shakes his head. He cannot. So his ultimate redemption is he does stay behind even when he is allowed to leave. He's given permission to leave. He's exalted of his sins by Bran, but he still stays, and he dies trying to defend him. Theon does not charge him like a fucking idiot. He does defend a little bit, but ultimately fails because nothing can really defend against the Night King. And the Night King kind of looms over Bran, and Arya does sneak her way into the Godswood and is about to go and kill the Night King. There's an owl here. And is about to go kill the Night King when the Night King either kills Bran or turns him just into a White Walker right then and there. And seeing that absolutely traumatizes and breaks Arya. Also, a major change for Arya in the episode is that she is still a super capable fighter, but she is small and fast, but lacks muscle mass, so she's not strong. And we will also see in this episode how the Hound is extremely strong, but he's not fast enough. And this will come into play later on. So all the other characters retreat into the crypts, just all their remaining forces retreat there and then make their escape out through the escape tunnel in the crypt. So as they're trying to make their escape through the crypts, some soldiers need to stay behind to basically give the others time. Before they retreat into the crypts, I would have it so that Brienne sacrifices herself to save Jaime at some point. Jaime obviously does not think that he deserves this, and having her die is a major loss for him, because she is a woman that he greatly respects and maybe even loves. However, as she dies, they get this little like touching moment, and she gives him the sword back, Oathkeeper, and says, "Defend Catelyn's daughters. That was your oath. You made it mine, now I make it yours." And as he dies. And Jaime takes this to heart. So when the rest of their forces basically make their escape, he is one of those who stays behind with Oathkeeper, and he has this moment where he says something to Sansa and maybe Arya that he's keeping the promise he made to their mother. And he dies. He dies. He gets a complete redemptive arc there at the end. It might be a little bit cookie cutter, but I still like it that he ultimately ends up keeping an oath. The man who was so famous for breaking them dies for keeping one. Dany and Jon basically have to get back on their dragons and flee, and they lose the battle at Winterfell. Winterfell falls, and they have to now move south. Now, episode 4 would focus mostly on Dany's descent into madness. The overall plot of the next 2 episodes is the journey south. Everybody is just kind of like, it's there are only remaining troops and the remaining civilians. All the holdfasts kind of like join up with them and just move south because that's the only way they can go. Meanwhile, we keep intercutting with Cersei, who is just putting up defenses. She's heard of what's happened. She's putting up defenses along the line. We get the sense that she is planning something bad. She's preparing the city for war. She's preparing for the northern forces to come down. But we don't know what else she's planning. Meanwhile, as they move south, we really start to see the cracks in Dany's psyche. Just losing Jorah and having to re-kill Viserion has done a fucking number on her. And she is beginning to resent Jon for basically talking her into fighting this war. Although she can't deny it is insanely necessary for them to do so, she's beginning to resent him for it. Now, they will briefly stop at Moat Cailin, like obviously this episode would take a couple of weeks, and you would maybe feel that a little bit. They would stop at Moat Cailin and consider putting up defenses there, but soon it becomes apparent that the White Walkers they do not care about the marshes. They just continue marching on through the marshes. Yeah. It's at this point that the Grey Worm and the Unsullied, along with some other minor characters, stay behind just to basically give the rest of Dany and Jon's forces and the civilians time to make it to King's Landing. That is like the only place where they can now make their final stand. Now, as they kind of get close to the crossroads, they're getting closer to King's Landing. They are ambushed. It's not going to be Euron who's ambushing them. It's just going to be Lannister men, no-name Lannister men. They will have the Scorpions lined up and then basically have the element of surprise. That is how they managed to kill Rhaegal. I absolutely agree that Rhaegal would need to die in episode 4. It is an important milestone for Dany to lose Rhaegal. So at this point, she's lost so much. She's lost Jorah Mormont. She's lost Viserion again. She was forced to kill him. She's lost Grey Worm, and now she's lost Rhaegal. At this point, she is starting to unravel. And that will basically be the end of episode 4. Now, I know I haven't mentioned him a lot, but yeah, Ghost is there as well. Ghost is always by Jon's side. Jon tries to send him away, but Ghost fucking refuses. Because Ghost is a fucking good boy, and he's gonna be there. He's gonna be there for Jon, okay? Alright, so episode 5. They're getting closer to King's Landing, and in the first half of the episode, we'll really get more character moments between Dany and Jon. The fact that he has a better claim to the throne than her. The fact that she keeps losing people. Her people. People that she's loved. She is just slowly starting to descend more and more into madness. We keep getting these hints that she keeps flying off the handle. She keeps overreacting. She's basically stricken with grief as she's just unraveling more and more. But she's still Dany. Like, I feel like we shouldn't have her morals get warped the way they did in the show, necessarily. But you can begin to see that pushed a little bit more, and she might just crack. Now, the second half of the 5th episode would have them come to King's Landing. At this point, they are caught between a rock and a hard place. Cersei has bolstered her defenses. She has the Golden Company. They're inside the city, though. And Daenerys tries to maintain her pride and demands that Cersei steps down. But obviously Cersei is not going to do that. However, soon enough, the White Walkers start to emerge out of the neighboring tree lines with their like misty winter fog. And it becomes apparent that they need to fucking get into King's Landing now. But they don't. They're not let in. Cersei does not let up. And the Lannister men and the Golden Company start firing at them as the White Walkers start biting at their heels. Dany just kind of... She doesn't absolutely flip, not just yet, but she does take matters into her own hands. She does get back up on Drogon. She flies up into the air, starts breathing down fire onto the Scorpions. We've seen that when the Scorpions don't necessarily have the element of surprise, they are no match for a dragon who's completely aware of their presence. And she starts taking down the Scorpions. She starts taking down the soldiers on the walls, and she blows up the doors, the front doors of King's Landing, letting her people in, letting Jon and her forces in. But in the process, Missandei gets killed, and Dany notices this. So she starts raining down fire on top of her enemies. Not the people, not just yet. But eventually Drogon does get hit by a trebuchet, not a scorpion. He doesn't get damaged that much, but he does get knocked out of the sky. He just like barely manages to kind of like reduce his speed just as they hit the ground. Dany gets hurt. She kind of tumbles on the ground, and at this point she starts to get circled by the people of the city. Now, of course, Cersei has been basically spreading the propaganda that Dany is there to enslave them, that she's there to kill them, and they do not like that. So not only has she been losing all of her people, all of her loved ones, but now the people that she is trying to defend are turning against her. Like these innocents, these small folk that she's trying to save are like throwing rocks at her, and then when they bring out spears and are clearly about to kill her one remaining child, her Drogon, that's when she fucking flips. When she just kind of like, in a moment of pure desperation, she cracks and just whispers Dracarys, and Drogon starts spewing fire on them. And then she gets back on Drogon's back and just keeps shouting Dracarys again and again and again, and the dragon just keeps spitting fire on everything. And that would be the end of episode 5. It would end with Daenerys flipping out, and with the rest of her forces just like looking up and seeing fire rain down on Lannister men, Golden Company, the small folk of King's Landing, and their own people. Now, episode 6, this is the penultimate episode. This is the big battle episode. Dany is still raining down fire on everybody. Jon is trying to basically defend the people. Sansa, after having spent years in King's Landing, knows that Maegor's Holdfast in the Red Keep is the safest place to store them. That is the safest place they can keep their small folk, their people. So she starts marching them towards Maegor's Keep. They at this point, they're fighting Golden Company, they're fighting Lannisters, they're fighting their own men. It's just a chaos. Everybody's trying to get away from the dragon flames, and it is just like, it is a free-for-all. Everybody's fighting everyone, and it's just basically Jon and his closest men are, his most trusted men are basically trying to defend the innocent, and they're trying to maintain their honor and just any sense of order in this insane battle. At the meantime, Cersei's plans keep failing. She's not just sitting idly by. She has put plans forward. She has placed contingency plans, but all of those contingency plans keep failing. It's at this point that she starts to notice that everybody's abandoning her. Out at sea, Euron's fleet has been fighting Asha's fleet because she needs to be there too. Why leave her out of the final battle? But as he sees both the White Walkers storm the city and the dragon burning the city, truly a battle of ice and fire, he just like hightails it. He's like, no, fuck it. But Asha has also created her own scorpions, and she uses those scorpions to basically sink his ship. And being the opportunistic asshole that he is, he tries to abandon his ship, but gets caught up in the ropes and gets forcefully brought down with the ship. He goes down with the ship, as the captain should. Asha then has a brief moment of self-reflection where she tries to figure out if she should also just hightail it, or if she should try and like join the battle. And she does. She does eventually rally the rest of the Ironborn, and they go join the fray to just try and defend the people and try and kill the White Walkers. Now, throughout this whole ordeal, we've seen the weirwoods basically slowly start to die. Like, once Bran was changed, the weirwoods have been dying. But we also get the feeling that something is like troubling the Night King. Like, I don't want the Night King to be too personified, but it is as something is sometimes holding him back, and he doesn't seem to understand it. But we are getting the slight suspicion that there's a little bit left of Bran in there, using his three-eyed raven powers to basically thwart the Night King from within a little bit, since now he is connected to whatever hive mind powers the Night King has. So they basically fight their way up to the Red Keep. At this point, Arya and the Hound have started fighting together, and we get this good mix of Arya's fast, quick fighting style with Sandor Clegane's slow but heavy fighting style. I'm not a big fan of Clegane Bowl. I thought it was just so much fan service, but I would accept Clegane Bowl if it had plot reasons. If it wasn't just like Sandor going to kill his brother just to kill his brother. However, if the two of them would meet Sandor Clegane in the Red Keep, as everybody is kind of like running away, that would make more sense. Like, he would be in their way. They would have to fight him in order to get the people into Maegor's Holdfast. At this point, everybody's leaving Cersei. Her advisors and all of her trusted companions are proving themselves to be the opportunistic assholes that they are. Cersei doesn't have any real friends. She has almost made a point to surround herself with people with basically yes men who do whatever she says, whatever she wants. And now that desperation sets in, now that things are really falling apart, she really begins to see that she has no friends. She has nobody around her. Nothing. And so, as they desert her, all hope abandons her. And she eventually does kind of get buried by rubble, but she doesn't die yet. The other characters keep running into the Night King. They keep trying to fight him. They keep trying to find new ways to kill him. But everything they try just seems to do nothing. Sansa manages to get the small folk into the keep, and even the people in King's Landing, saving everybody. She's the one leading everybody, while Jon is sort of the grand protector. Now, obviously, Tyrion is more of a politician than a general, but his intimate knowledge of King's Landing would help Jon and the other fighters to basically find a shit ton of wildfire to use against the White Walkers. It makes sense to me to use wildfire against the White Walkers. It would make sense for it to have been there for so long, and now it's just become this perfect weapon against the Whites. As they manage to get the people in, Drogon is just like decimating the entire city. Eventually, in their fight against the mountain, Arya and Sandor get separated. Arya gets like thrown out a window. She kind of ends up in the Godswood, because the Red Keep has a Godswood. The Weirwood is kind of like dying, but it's still there. And we don't know what happens to her, but she seems to have survived. Jon and the others keep fighting. The Night King and his White Walkers are now leading the charge, and they're just decimating them. And basically before too long, Jon and maybe a couple of other characters would also find themselves in the Godswood. I feel like Davos should survive. Sadly, I would kill Tormund. Jon would finally be there to try and kill the Night King, but would also pretty much get defeated and almost mortally wounded. Or maybe even like thrown off the balcony, like he lands on some rooftop far below and is just like seriously injured. Like we get robbed of Jon killing the Night King like we've expected. But it's at this point that we would see why it was important for Bran to become the three-eyed raven. Because at this point, Bran, like, we'll have one of the whites wheel him in there. It would be weird to have a wheelchair zombie or white, but sure, he's there. And it's at this point it becomes truly clear that he is still fighting the Night King. And just as some of the other characters that are remaining, let's say Davos is like the last character fighting the Night King. All the small folk are back in Maker's Holdfast. It is just like Davos is the only one left fighting the Night King. And there's this brief moment of, like, he stumbles and he is struggling to get his sword out of his scabbard or something. And the Night King is about to like hit him, but then it's like we see Bran like reach out his hand or something, and like it briefly stops the Night King long enough for Davos to like bring up his sword, and the Night King like then poof, and it's enough to like hold him, like to save him a little bit. But Davos basically has his hands up against the sword. It's cutting into him. He's pressed up against the weirwood, and then Bran keeps on doing it, and just kind of like disrupts him long enough that Davos pushes him away. And at that point we see Arya jump down out of the weirwood and then plunge the dagger into his heart. And then there's this brief moment of uncertainty, like, oh shit, that didn't even help either. And then poof, he explodes and all the whites start crumbling. But Dany is still just decimating everything. Jon is on the rooftop, on one of the rooftops, and he's just like, his leg is mangled, he is all fucked up. He kind of like stumbles upwards and he sees one of the scorpions still there. He's gonna have his Bran moment from from The Hobbit. He just kind of like starts like limping towards it, like as he sees Drogon coming closer to closer, and Drogon is just like charging towards the Red Keep. He's about to like do the final run to completely decimate the Holdfast and everybody in it. And Jon like forcibly wheels around the scorpion and fires at the exactly right opportunity, and it hits Drogon right in the chest and maybe goes a little bit far. And no, let's say it doesn't hurt Dany. It doesn't stab Dany, but Dany has now lost her final child. The Drogon just comes crashing down onto like the rooftops, through the rooftops, into the buildings, and it's just like Dany just gets thrown off, and Jon just crumbles down. And the ending of episode 6 is just basically all the characters just lying as the ash starts like raining down. Winter is dissolving, the White Walkers have been defeated, the dragon has been defeated, and everybody's just fucking done. And that is episode 6. Now here comes the truly tricky part. Episode 7, the series finale. How do you end such a long-term series? No, sure, the plenty of you are not gonna like what I have to say about it either, but here we go. The episode would begin with basically Maker's Holdfast opening up. The small folk are coming out, they're kind of surveying the damage. They're all thanking they're all thanking Sansa for having saved them. We see that the Hound has killed the Mountain. He and Arya kind of rejoin, and Tyrion walks through the rubble of the Red Keep and finds Cersei. And at this point, Cersei has had all of her closest allies basically abandon her. And it's going to be kind of ironic that the only person she has left is the brother that she hated the most. And still in the show, Tyrion always still seemed to try and save his sister. He still loves his sister because she's his sister. And I would maintain the same thing. They have like a brief moment of catharsis where she finally accepts him as family right before she dies. It'll be super tragic for Tyrion, but it would be like the first moment that Tyrion really feels accepted. Because it's not just anybody, it's Cersei of all people. Meanwhile, Jon meets Daenerys in the rubble of King's Landing. She's also super fucked up and clearly bleeding internally. And there is nothing really to be done. She's clearly dying. And we don't know if he's dying too. But they have this sort of moment where they have this scene, almost this sort of Shakespearean conversation where they start accusing each other of betraying each other, and then eventually we start to see Dany realize what she's done now that the sort of anger has subsided. She shows real remorse for what she has done. She starts to see the bodies of the innocents that she's burned, and she's like, she doesn't know how to live with it. The longer the conversation goes on, the more she starts to succumb to her wounds, and the conversation like starts off at this kind of like medium level. It rises up in tone as they start accusing each other, and the closer she gets to death, the quieter it gets, until they're basically both lying on the ground holding each other, and she's dying, and she's expressing grief for all the people she's lost, expressing grief for not having been able to broken the wheel, to expressing grief for having failed basically. And Jon is trying to like do whatever he can to make it easier on her. He's basically lying to her that there was nothing she could have done, that she did the best she could, even if he doesn't believe it himself. And finally she does die in his arms. Hopefully this way we get a better or clearer character arc for her. And I feel like her regretting what she did is a much better turn of character than somebody who just turns evil. Evil! Now those would probably just be the first 20 minutes of the episode, but the rest of the episode would be taking place over the course of some months as people try to rebuild and try to figure out who's going to be the king now. Now obviously Tyrion, after seeing Dany fail so spectacularly, he is still has reserved feelings about putting Jon on the throne, even though he is Aegon Targaryen. Sansa, who is very much playing the Game of Thrones now, wants to see Jon on the throne. And everything comes to a head where everybody agrees that Jon is going to be the new king, and he kind of becomes the king, or he kind of becomes elected as the king against his will. However, what Jon now harbors is Dany's ideals of breaking the wheel, of basically fighting for the people. That's what so much of it has been about. So he doesn't feel it's fair to just become the new king. So what he does is purposely dismantle the Iron Throne. We don't need Drogon to melt the fucking throne. Like, the dragons are not that smart. We've been seeing time and time again, they're just animals. Slightly more majestic animals, but they're still animals. So it's Jon who dismantles the chair. It is symbolic of an age, of a bygone era. And slowly over the next years, he and the others basically rebuild King's Landing and rebuild everything and build a more of a democratic system. I'm fine with that. That would make sense to me. By the episode's end, years have passed. Sansa is the ruler of Winterfell. Arya and the Hound have just gone off on adventures on their own. Tyrion and Davos are like elected officials in King's Landing, and they're talking about how like Jon has gone and that nobody knows where he's gone. And we get the final scene of the show, much like it was in the actual episode, would be Jon and Ghost basically going north over the wall. Jon is old, Ghost is also old. He's a very big direwolf at this point. And the show ends with that. Yeah. Now, to be perfectly truthful, I did not really think all of this out. Some of this I was just making up on the spot, but I'm kind of happy with it. Now I might actually change some of these things, obviously, if I was working on it over a longer period of time, but that would be an ending that would satisfy me a lot more. I feel like a lot more of the character arcs would be brought full circle. And yeah. God, this has been a long episode. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry this has been a long episode. I hope you guys had fun with it. If you guys think I'm an absolute idiot, please just comment that. Tell me how you really feel. Tell me how you guys would have ended the show. Obviously, we're not gonna agree on any of this. Probably not. But I mean, it's a fun thought exercise, and I feel like that's how people grow as writers and as creative artists. We see the things that we love and we try to figure out ways to make them better. Like, we see the things that we don't like and we see the things that we do like, and we try to implement and change those things to fit our own styles, our own narrative styles. That being said, I am gonna miss Game of Thrones. Still have the books. Not entirely sure when they're gonna be finished. But yeah, I still do like the series as a whole, although it kind of fluttered and died there at the end. But it's still an amazing series, and just production-wise, the final season was freaking amazing. Just absolutely breathtaking. The battle scenes were better than most of the battle scenes I've ever seen in most Hollywood blockbusters. It was just crazy. Like the Long Night battle scene, although the battle plans didn't really make much sense, it was absolutely terrifying just seeing the whites fucking just rain down on them, and just like a wall of zombies come through the darkness. It was absolutely terrifying. And seeing Daenerys fly over King's Landing and just absolutely decimate the shit out of it was fun. It just didn't make sense with the build-up that they had. Yeah. So this should be coming out on Wednesday, which means tomorrow for you guys, I will be going to the Queen Mary, the haunted ship, and we'll be staying there overnight. And it is going to be super fun. So I will probably be doing another episode, or releasing another episode either during the weekend, or I might just do it next week. We'll see. But yeah, next episode should be spooky scary. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later.
Bran, 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 Bran,